Welcome to the F1's Sake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula 1 fans chatting absolute nonsense and offering our ridiculously biased opinions. And we're in quite a different setting to where we were this time last year, are we not, Brad?
To say the least, yeah.
Least.
We can wave at 75 billion cameras here, so that's pretty cool.
We've made it.
Yeah, well, in a way, we've made it. So, Tom, tell us about what we did today. What an experience so far.
Unbelievable.
Still coming as well. We've got more to do this evening. So
what a weekend for us, especially with the new season starting. So we only started this a year ago. So if you've not listened to us before, welcome. Please stick with us for the rest of the season. But we've come on leaps and bounds this season, and we've been invited down by the very gracious hosts from Pod Live, who've done a fantastic week-long event with numerous huge podcasts from the sports industry. And we've been lucky enough to go and see the race, one of the biggest Formula One race podcasts of the current era. And so we've managed to go and sit through that, ask some questions. They had a guest star, Ted Kravitz, on. It's been a pretty amazing day for us. We're kind of in dreamland. I know we're in Spiritland recording this, but we're in dreamland a little bit. And we're just on top of the world at the minute. So it's...
I've got to say how strange it is to see Ted in person. Yeah. When it literally came up to us to ask a question, stood on my foot even, to ask Tom a question. Or
he'll never wash that foot again.
Yeah, this shoe's never getting washed. Actually, it's only Ted, isn't it? Come on. But yeah, weird seeing him in person, because you've listened to him like my whole life pretty much.
Yeah.
And then you see him there and he sounds exactly how he sounds on TV. Obviously it's the same person, but it's just dead weird.
And he's a lovely guy.
Yeah,
really nice guy,
like
really down to earth. He was willing to spend loads of time with everybody. So thank you, Ted, if you're listening, which you probably are now. You're a firm for F1's Sake fan, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we tried to invite him on, kind of, and that didn't really go.
There's a roundabout way that we could do it. So if everybody listens, maybe we create a Patreon page, maybe something like that, buy some merch, maybe if we release
probably going to cost a lot, isn't it?
It's going to cost a lot. Maybe one day. The more of you that listen, the better.
Exactly.
But we typically do this remotely, don't we, Brad? Throughout the year. You live in Jersey, I live up near Manchester, and so we don't get the luxury of being able to do this in person every day of the week or every week of the year whilst the races are on. And so this is a luxury for us, not only that, but to be able to record it in a professional studio. And so if you're watching us, we'll be posting this obviously to our YouTube channels, and there'll be clips to it on our TikTok as well as YouTube Shorts. We'll be posting it everywhere. We'll be milking it until death's door. But this is a huge luxury for us, so we're really, really thankful to the guys here for inviting us down. So today, what we wanted to focus on, it's going to be a short form podcast, but we wanted to kind of delve into the newcomers in Formula One. And we say that loosely because we're going to talk about Nick de Vries, who obviously has had a Formula One race. But we wanted to kind of delve into who they are, how they've managed to get to Formula One, their previous achievements, and whether we believe that they're in the right place, whether they're deserving of their places in Formula One, but also what they can particularly achieve in their respective teams. So I wanted to start off with Logan Sargeant, Brad. Probably the most controversial of the three that have come up. Obviously, he's joining Williams because he got the amount of super license points that he needed from the Formula 2 season last season. And so, he's controversial by the fact that he's not really won a championship that he's been a part of, other than, in fact, he hasn't won a championship that he's been a part of. And so you think as Formula One as being the pinnacle of the motor racing industry, you'd think that only people that have won absolutely everything, the likes of Lewis Hamilton, even Nico Hulkenberg, a strange one, to get a chance. And so, what's your opinion on Logan Sargeant on the face of it?
Well, it's not particularly a positive one to start off with, to be honest. I think, Tom actually asked the question to Ted and the guys when we were at the race podcast. So he said about how we think maybe Logan isn't deserving of a space in Formula One. Straight away, I think about the American sponsors and the way that he is one of the only American drivers that are going to come into Formula One.
Yeah,
that's got to be a pretty big point. It just makes no sense to me because he hasn't won anything. He's been very comfortable in 19th place when he comes to Williams. That seems to be where he's been majority of his career. So he's not a champion. Whereas the likes of Nick de Vries coming into it has had experience in a Formula One car, but also experience being a champion. So I just don't know what to think of it. I'm really very confused at why we've got Logan Sargeant coming into this team.
See, for me, looking at Williams' situation, one thing that they touched on in the race, and if you haven't listened to that podcast yet, I'm sure you'll be able to, and you'll be able to hear my voice, maybe, unless they've clipped me out. And so they kind of mention the fact that they believe that this decision was made before this kind of restructuring the team, because we know that James Vowles is coming in, which is a fantastic signing for Williams, coming over from Mercedes and having those championships under his belt. He knows what is needed to do in order to yield those results. And so they've kind of looked at it from that perspective. But for me, I mean, they want to steer clear of this in the media, and I think that a lot of the media coverage of it has tried to steer clear of what we're going to say. And it's a case that there's no hiding the fact that Logan is an American driver, and we've not had an American driver in Formula One since 2015, which is Alexander Rossi, which is a long time ago, and that was a pretty abysmal racing career. You know,
I don't even remember him.
Exactly, you don't even remember him because he was at the back of the grid. I think he was with Manor Racing at the time, essentially. Doesn't really matter. And so now we've got 3 Grand Prix in the US. That's a huge market, and especially for a team like Williams that are emerging. They're trying to come up through the ranks. They're trying to build a brand image from the ground up. You know, I say that loosely because of the fact that they've got so much history, but them as a team now are kind of in a new era. And so for them, I think this appointment, from my perspective at least, is that this is all a branding exercise. This is how many eyes can we get on to Williams? Can we get our sponsors' eyes? Because he's going to be covered massively in those 3 American Grand Prix. That's going to bring money via the sponsors because they're going to get more airtime. And hopefully then that will bring more money into Williams that they can inject into the car and hopefully increase the performance of that. And so for me, that seems to be the only logical explanation as to why Logan is in that Williams seat. I mean, if you look at his achievements, his standout achievements, the best one...
Let me see if I can find them.
Well, I've got them here because I'm prepared.
It's a joke, Tom. There's not much there.
There isn't much there. I mean, in terms of his major achievements, the best one probably being second in UAE Formula 4. But beyond that, you know, he came 3rd in British Formula 4 and 3rd in British Formula 3. And that is a commendable achievement. That's no mean feat. You know, we know how difficult that is. I mean, even speaking to James Walker, who we've had on the podcast previously, if you've not listened to those episodes, please do. You know, James is a World Endurance Championship racer and a fantastic guy all round. And, you know, he says, you know, in that environment, it's so unbelievably competitive. And so to come 3rd in that is no mean feat. And you also got a podium at the prestigious Macau Grand Prix, which is a huge race. But in Formula 2, he came 4th. Not terrible.
Respectable, isn't it?
It's
I'd be pretty happy
respectable.
with that.
But if you think, you know, the unfortunate thing is, you know, winning Formula 2 doesn't nowadays guarantee you a seat in Formula 1. You know, because of the explosion of Netflix and the whole Drive to Survive series, a lot of the decisions by the teams are based around popularity and a branding exercise.
Yeah, but what I find really strange is that we've got him coming in as a 4th place championship holder in the Formula 2 series. We haven't got someone like Drugovich coming in who's just won, and he's Brazilian, so that surprised me a little bit, because you think if you're Brazilian, you're pretty marketable again, because there's not many Brazilian drivers out there. You've got the likes of Ayrton Senna, who's been in Formula 1 already, and he was one of the greatest. I'm not saying Drugovich could be one of the greatest, who knows? But, you know, with that kind of that heritage and stuff with Brazilian racers, that's also pretty big. And we're really tapped into the American side of motorsport. They've got motorsport in NASCAR and IndyCar and things like that. But for Formula 1, I mean, he still made it. And he's only just gotten the super license points to actually compete in Formula 1, which is another reason I'm quite surprised, because it just doesn't make sense.
But do you think, I mean, thinking about it whilst you're talking then, I wonder whether part of that decision could have been influenced by Formula One themselves, because they've tapped in, they've invested a lot of money. I mean, the Miami Grand Prix and Vegas Grand Prix have had a lot of direct investment from Formula One, as I understand it. And so they're thinking, well, great, we've got those Grand Prix now. They're in the bag. However, the Americans need somebody to cheer on.
Yeah, we need more.
They need something to latch on to make that investment worthwhile. And so maybe they've looked, because you'd think with De Vries's performance with Williams at Monza, you'd think, well, surely he would be their first choice. He's been in the car, you know, he's understood it, you know, he was part of the Mercedes. He kind of fits. So I was surprised that they didn't announce that. So I wonder whether Formula One has had some influence on putting him into that seat. Maybe it's for a year or two just to kind of get some traction in the sport in the US.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit controversial, I guess, with Formula One getting involved with teams'
We
decisions.
don't claim not to be controversial.
I mean, I think in the recent media in general, there's so much controversy around new teams coming into Formula One. the way that people are reacting to these new teams wanting to come into Formula One, like Andretti and things like that. Yeah, maybe they did have a decision on that. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I personally thought Miami was a really awful display of what Formula One can produce.
It was, yeah.
I'm hoping that when they do Vegas, which I think, again, they're probably going to inject a lot of money into, that it's better, because Miami was just embarrassing.
Vegas, I think Vegas will be a similar vibe, but on a tackier level to Monaco, in a sense that it's not about the racing spectacle, it's about everything that goes around it.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if in 40 years' time we're going to look at that track and go, that was something special, or they're still doing it and it's like Monaco. But Monaco's just got so much heritage. Speaking of heritage, like Senna and stuff like that, you see people like him going around that track in the old cars, and it's just special.
Yeah,
I feel like Vegas just isn't going to have that anyway, because it's a 52-second straight and just a few corners. That's pretty much it. Yeah, apparently. Well, on the Formula One game for the test track,
of the most accurate representation of the circuit.
On any other track, the timings are pretty accurate. So they have to do it because of the sim level, and the esports drivers are doing similar times to the actual drivers anyway. So they reckon it'll be about 45 to 50 seconds of a straight, which is ridiculous. They could probably put 3 DRS zones in that.
Well, that'll be interesting to see what the car developments are for that, because you look at Monza and how skinny the rear wings get. I mean, God, what they're going to look like when we go to Vegas. I am interested to see what it's like.
Imagine what fuel you'll burn going down that straight. It's going to be ridiculous.
The slipstream is going to be so powerful.
You'll be able to overtake and then re-overtake the person that overtook you, because you lost that spot in a different DRS zone during that straight.
Maybe the supporting driver is the one that gives DRS first, gets overtaken, and then picks it back up again to the end of the straight.
I mean, it's not a completely complex track, but we're going off course there anyway. I don't know how
we've digressed slightly.
But yeah, Sargent, again, that American side of things surely has to play a part of why he's in that car. There's just no way around that. I don't think I can think of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it makes sense. You know, when we talk about Formula One maybe having some suggestion of putting him into that seat, it makes sense with the fact that, you know, Williams came last in the Constructors' Championship last season, so they've not really got a lot to lose in that sense. You know, If it's a failure, then they can, you know, kind of pin that on the car not being up to scratch. Obviously, we'll have to see where Albon is, and obviously he can only ever be judged on his team partner. But I think that, you know, realistically, what do you think Logan could achieve this season?
20th place,
10th place. Did I say 20th?
No, I just said, you said, where do I think it's going to end? I think he'll end last.
Oh, okay.
So I think it'd be 20th place.
You confused me then.
No. 20th place is where I can see him finishing, purely because Williams in general just don't have a great record in the last 10 years now of finishing well. He needs to find his way in Formula One. I think if he wants to stay in that seat, he's going to have to perform a certain way and really compete with Albon, which I think is going to be difficult anyway, because Albon's got 3 years worth. Was it 3 years now? Or this is his third year of experience in Formula One, which is still quite a bit. So I don't know how Logan's going to compete with Alex. And
well Albon is we know he's a really capable driver.
Yeah.
We know it was unfortunate, his stint that he had at Red Bull. I think he was promoted too soon, but we know that he's an extremely capable driver. And so if Logan can at least come within, I don't know, a 10th or 2 of Albon week in, week out, I think for him that's job done.
Yeah.
I don't know what Williams can achieve as a team this season. I think it's a tall order for them to be able to kind of, I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed, they can kind of not come 10th in the Constructors. I mean, anything is better. I think they scored 8 points in total last season, which is
more than usual, isn't it? Probably more than they have in the last 2 seasons put together.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 seasons, I think they've been lucky to get away with 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And so they've got a lot of work to do this season. And I think having Logan in that car for the team's performance isn't going to be the best bet. You know, Albon is a great benchmark, and they can benchmark their team's performance off of him, and the car's performance, I should say, off of him.
Yeah.
But I don't see what Logan is going to contribute. I could be wrong. You know, we could look at these results, and sometimes you get results like that. Look at Lando Norris. He didn't win the Formula 2 championship the season before he came into Formula 1, but we know how amazing of a driver Lando is. And Albon was the same. He was in the same season. I know he's a fantastic driver, and so maybe he could match Albon on his outright performance, but obviously Albon's got more experience.
I feel like we're probably not going to be, but if we are, I'll put it out there again. We're doing these little, I don't know, challenges for each other. If Sargent does outscore L1 on points, I will get his name tattooed on me.
You heard it here
That's
first.
bold.
You heard
It's
it
bold.
here
I don't really
first.
want to have Logan Sargent
That's
on me.
recorded on 3 separate cameras and 2 microphones.
2 very good microphones. Yeah, so we're going to say that I might regret that, but I just think Albon's going to outperform. And I think someone they needed in that team was like a Vettel, with experience coming in, helping out. They've got new staff as well, right? So they've taken the guy from Mercedes,
James Vowles.
So they've got him. He's incredible. So he's already produced great cars in the past. He's helped to produce those cars. So
he's aware of a title-winning.
Yeah,
he knows what is expected of the team to do that.
Yeah, well, essentially, if you're a champion, you've been in that constructor, you've been a champion with them. So he knows how that's going to work, and hopefully he can produce some different kind of atmosphere. And maybe they can challenge even like Alpha or whoever else is going to be a back runner this year. Maybe just give them a little bit of a challenge rather than just sitting at the back the whole time. Yeah. No Latifi in that car. I think that's a positive straight off the bat. He's got to be better than Latifi, surely.
But as you can tell, Brad was the biggest Latifi fan. If you've not listened to the season's podcast from last season, you'll know that Brad was pretty...
the GOAT. Yeah, let's see where that goes with Sargent. But should we move on to Nicholas?
Nicholas, we can go to Nicholas. I was going to go to Piastri.
All right, let's go to Piastri.
Okay, we'll go to Piastri. Our favourite driver of all time ever.
Yeah, I am rooting for him this year.
We spoke a lot about him last season, even before he was announced by McLaren, before we had this whole drama with the Alpine McLaren situation. But Oscar Piastri, out of all the drivers that we're going to talk about today, for me, is the one most deserving of his Formula One. He is the blueprint for what you would expect a Formula One driver to have done in order to get into that situation. To give you a brief overview of what he's done, standout achievements: he came second in British Formula 4. He was then Formula Renault champion. Then he was Formula 3 champion, and then he was Formula 2 champion in consecutive seasons. That is no mean feat. The only other people that I could find, and I could be wrong about this, but the only other people that I could find off the top of my head were Lewis Hamilton, that's also achieved the same feat, and it was Nico Hülkenberg. Oh, and George Russell.
So all 3 really promising.
I mean,
F1
Nico
drivers.
Hülkenberg was unfortunate. We spoke to James in length about this in the podcast. I think it was in the Christmas episode. He was talking about Nico Hülkenberg and how quick he was because he raced against him.
Yeah.
And he was unfortunate. I think he was in the wrong team at the wrong time.
Yeah.
But obviously, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton's 2 amazing drivers. And so he's got a lot to live up to. He's got more of a background in terms of achievements than Norris.
Yeah, that is crazy.
That's saying
just to think about. I mean, we've got people in the paddock now as well on that grid that you would expect are going to be champions at some point in their career. With Charles, Sainz, Lando. But I think Piastri is right in that question immediately. He's not even raced yet, and I feel like he's the next big thing for Formula One. And
well, that's how it came across with this whole saga. Because if you've not heard, obviously Oscar was a junior driver for Alpine. And so it was expected that if anything were to happen with their main drivers, which was Ocon and Alonso at the time, Oscar would have been promoted.
Yeah.
Alonso moves to Aston Martin. Alpine obviously announces Oscar Piastri is the main driver. We all think, job's done, he's in Formula One. Then he wakes up. This was all in the middle of the night in Australia. Then he wakes up. And then we get the famous tweet about him basically saying, this wasn't agreed by me, I wasn't told, I never signed anything. And so ensued the drama.
Yeah.
And so they've been to court, the lawyers have discussed it, and it seems that McLaren was in the right to be able to do what they did, and obviously now he's a McLaren driver. But to go through that kind of controversy even before you get to Formula One, he's going to have a lot of eyes on him in terms of this season and what he can achieve. And I think it's unrealistic to think that he could outperform Lando just because of the fact that Lando's got the experience in McLaren. He's got those years under his belt and he knows how the team operates. He knows how the car operates. He knows what's expected of him. But it was interesting that they talked about this in the podcast that we watched with the race in terms of what they would expect in terms of Lando not being a partner to Daniel Ricciardo, because they said he kind of took his foot off the gas because Ricciardo really wasn't that much of a point scorer at McLaren. We were pretty. Before. We may have mentioned that once or twice, and so they're expecting a fiercer Lando, because I was a little bit disappointed with him last season. There was a couple of instances where he only outqualified Ricciardo by maybe half a tenth, and you think, well, we know that he's a much faster driver than that. Maybe he was just kind of in a situation where he couldn't really be asked to do it. But
Yeah, I mean, look, Ricciardo clearly didn't have a great run with McLaren at all. I'm kind of glad that he's moved on and he can take a break and reflect on that. But yeah, we're having like a fiercer Norris and what we kind of expect from him. I know we're not really speaking about him now, but Norris has really got to prove himself again because he's coming against a young champion who clearly deserves his spot at McLaren, who I think is really going to push Norris. And we did see a little bit of explosion between Ricciardo and Norris where they were competing, and Norris gets a little bit angry. He seems to be quite frustrated when the car goes wrong. I don't think he's going to have room for that against someone like Piastri because he's going to keep pushing. And depending on Piastri's attitude, I think that's really going to be what decides what happens between those two races.
Yeah, Piastri's kind of got a season in lieu, I think, this year. It's a case that he can go into that team with no expectation of having to beat Lando. He's got a year's buffer where he can try and understand the car and learn it. The pressure really this season is on Norris. He has to outperform Oscar at every race.
Yeah.
He really, really does. And this will be a true test of how good Lando Norris is. We said that when Ricciardo came in, we thought that was going to be the case, but Ricciardo just never seemed to gel with that car. And so Oscar's got it fairly cushy, I think, this season. I think he will have to at least perform to a level where he's at least to the level of Daniel Ricciardo.
At least. I can't really not do that. I mean, yeah, but what's interesting to me actually is that Piastri coming into this team, obviously with the Alpine scandal or whatever happened there, it's very odd. But I think he immediately is someone that we love because it just seems to be a happy face around the grid. Every time we see him, he seems happy. Australian drivers always seem to be fairly happy anyway.
Because they live in a beautiful part of
the
world.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like the drivers that we put in the top bracket, people do love straight away. So like George Russell, everyone seemed to love him before he went to Mercedes, just because of his attitude around and interviews and things like that.
I think one of the big factors of it is a bit of humility.
Yeah,
I think with George,
exactly.
He's a really likeable character because of that. And I mean, I've not seen enough of Oscar off track to make a decision on his character from that point of view. But I think that maybe is something that goes a little bit against Lando from what I've heard, at least anyway, because I've never kind of seen it from any perspective other than my own, where Lando just seems, great, happy, jovial all the time. But it seems that there's a community out there that doesn't seem to share the same.
Yeah, well, he's memey and stuff like that, isn't he? Norris, memey. I don't even know if that's a word, but he always seems to be cracking jokes. He streams every day on Twitch if he's not racing.
Every day.
Pretty much, yeah. Wow. I mean, he admitted in a recent interview that he literally games until the next day when he gets on. So he does play a lot of games. And people love that kind of attitude of him being very normal and down to earth. But that's why I feel like we put Lando into that bracket. He's not been that successful in Formula One. He's had a good time, but he's always been a midfield runner. And all Piastri has to do is come into that team and do the exact same thing. Just be a midfield runner and meet our little bit of an expectation of what he can do in that car.
He needs to show flashes of that talent.
Just brilliance, a little bit of brilliance, and that's all we need from him. So he's going to have I think he's going to have a fairly easy year at McLaren.
And I think that this year could set him up for a long-term plan.
Yeah.
Because we've got, obviously, Audi coming into Formula One in 2026, and there's a lot of rumours about them potentially snatching Norris from McLaren. I'd hate to see it, being a McLaren fan. But that seems to be, there's a lot of, there's no smoke without fire, and there's a lot of rumours surrounding that. And so McLaren could be looking at, okay, well, Oscar is young. He's got all these amazing achievements under his belt.
Yeah.
He can potentially come into Formula One as long as he shows a decent amount of pace in comparison to Norris, where McLaren can think, right, okay, we're picking up where Norris left off if he does leave to go to Audi. And then they've got, again, a younger driver that can carry them forward into the future. And so, like we said, I think he just needs to show those flashes of brilliance and kind of take leadership from Lando and kind of look at what he can achieve. Because, what do you think that McLaren can realistically achieve this season? There's been a lot of talk about them. We thought before the regulations changed that they were going to be on fire, because at the end of 2021 the car looked dialed in. They were getting really good results, the odd podium, and then the regulations change, and then all of a sudden they fall off. And it seems that they couldn't quite understand why that is.
Well, during testing they were really happy with their car for last year's testing. And that gave everyone a lot of hope that McLaren would be the best of the rest, at least, or maybe even competing for the top three. But it didn't really come to fruition as soon as we went into the first race. They just weren't where they expected to be. So I'm hoping that this year they've learned from that a little bit and don't start bigging themselves up too quickly. Keep it humble and just make that car the best it can be and produce a great car. They've got new facilities coming online this year, which I think is going to help that team massively.
Yeah.
So I do think with that assist, they should be the best of the rest. I just don't see it happening for the other teams.
Will they make much of a difference on this season though? Because I think they're due to. I think what they were saying, Ted was saying today, was they're due to come online in around about May, June time, and so a lot of the development for the car will have already been completed by now. You know, those upgrade packages that we see throughout the year, contrary to popular belief, have been designed months in advance.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not. It's not a case of they come to a race and go, "Oh, I've got an idea," and then we see it next week. Sometimes with small bits, but majority of it is pre-planned. And so it seems that those aren't going to yield the results until next season. And so McLaren, I think, are just kind of clinging onto that rope where they've just got to hold on to the top, that battle at the top of the midfield and desperately try not to slip behind, because Alpine, were there or thereabouts last season, obviously beat McLaren. McLaren came, I think, where they come fourth in the Constructors last season.
Fifth.
Is it fifth?
Sixth? Fifth? We should know this.
Fifth. No, I've got it. It's fifth. I can see it. It's very small, but I can see it. It's fifth.
So, a pretty good performance last year, I would say. But losing out to Alpine.
They should have come fourth.
Yeah, they should have come fourth. Losing out to Alpine right towards the end of the year was a bit of a letdown, especially with the amount of times that they had DNFs within Alpine. So they need to try and outperform them this year, but I don't know. I think they should. I do genuinely think they should.
A sentiment that wasn't shared by the guys at the race today.
Yeah.
Which disappointed me, being a McLaren.
Well, they thought Aston Martin would be well up in contention with that. That's completely random. I don't know where
that's a bold prediction.
Yeah, I mean,
because they've been so good since they came into Formula 1.
Yeah, they kind of made fun of Ted when he said that, and about how much they combust and how much goes wrong within Aston. I can't particularly say Stroll's the greatest driver ever.
What are you talking about? Alonso says he's going to be a future world champion.
Yeah, if Alonso says it, then it must be true. I just don't see Aston being in that contention. But again, wait and see, because testing, you don't know what's going to happen with these cars, because they can come out and look really good and not be good. So
we thought last season when testing came around, the McLaren looked quick.
Yeah, amazing.
They had the brake issues, and we thought, well, that's it. It's just brake issues, and they were hindered by that. And obviously, the development plan fell behind because they were trying to figure out what was going on with the brakes. But once they sorted the brakes, I don't know whether it was a case of just it was the fact that they were behind on their development curve, or whether it was a case of that car wasn't actually that quick to begin with. We don't really know that yet.
Yeah, I mean, putting it into perspective, Danny Rick said he absolutely loved that car during testing, and he said it was perfect for him and that it raced well. And that clearly didn't work well. So I don't think we can go into testing whatsoever and think that driver's happy is going to be good. So we have to wait for the actual racing to begin to actually give them a real test.
Yeah, we do. I mean, what do you think McLaren... What do you think would be a success for them this season? Do you think that they have to outshine themselves from last season? I mean, for me, I think they have to outdo Alpine at the very least. I mean, the test will be if Aston Martin are as quick as they believe they're going to be. If they're well off at the front of the midfield, I think the inter-team rivalry and the rivalry between Alpine and McLaren is going to be where their success will lie. I don't know how you feel. Yeah,
same way. I expect, for me personally, I'm going to root for Piastri this year anyway. I've already said that. I feel like I'm going to do it anyway. Why not? So I want them to come fourth, and I would like to see them actually compete a little bit with the top three. So rather than going towards Alpine being their main battle, I think they should focus on being even better than that, potentially rivaling the top three in some of the races, at least ones that they're particularly happy on.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's going to be. Maybe we get a great Australian performance, hopefully. I don't know, but I'd love to see them compete more. I feel every year has been a bit of a progress for them, but last year was the first time we've seen them step back a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that happen again. I love McLaren. I feel like they need more.
I just desperately want a team to bridge that gap from the midfield. It just seems like it's always a three-team battle.
Yeah.
And I think McLaren benefited from the fact in 2021 that the Ferrari was just not there.
Yeah.
And so we saw them snatch the odd podium. But as soon as Ferrari, if you kind of book their ideas in terms of the actual car's outright pace, we'll completely ignore the fact of what went on in the team last season. But the car in its outright pace seems to be pretty good. And so the F1 needs a team to bridge that gap. Desperately, it needs to be able to mix up these podium spots, because it's kind of an F1 and an F1.5 at the minute, and then if you count kind of the very back of the grid and the Haas and the Williams, maybe you can even see F1.8. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to see that a team bridge that gap. But I feel like now we're in a year of technology, everything's based on the technology in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how possible it is for a driver to outdo the faster car. I don't think it becomes too much about the driver, but what the team can actually produce in the car. So I don't know what they can do to make that car a little bit quicker to bridge that gap, because the staffing within Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull has always been top notch. They've had the best staff for years. So I just don't see...
Do you think that since that cost cap has come in, all it's done is solidify the positions they were already in, because they then can't...
Yeah, I mean, listening to the Racers podcast, it puts into perspective a little bit of how small that gap actually is for their cost cap, and how much that's really not going to have too much of an effect on the car.
Yeah. I suppose we've also got the testing regulations in terms of championship position and how much wind tunnel testing time, CFD items, all that type of information.
Yeah, I mean, even with the extra time they get in the wind tunnel, so Williams will have the longest time in the wind tunnel. I don't think that really changes anything, because the car is the same car going into the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to get enough data from that to decide that we need to change this and then do it. I feel like that can't happen. It just isn't going to be enough to beat the top teams. But we'll see what happens with the cost cap coming in. Maybe it has more of an effect on the team than we actually expect it to. And if Red Bull does fall off, then that would be amazing. I feel like they need to do more penalties, be more strict, just to keep it that way.
Controversial again.
It's always going to be controversial with us, but that's what I'd like to see. So I'm sure
it will be interesting to see that. It will, if Red Bull doesn't fall that far off, that clearly shows that technical regulation in terms of how much CFD items and how much wind tunnel testing time you get doesn't really have that much of an effect, which would surprise me, because you'd think as a percentage that's quite a big gap from first in the championship to last.
Yeah.
But it's, can they make use of it? Like you said, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes have had that staffing. They've got the brains in the team to make the most of that, every percentage of time that they get in order to test the item.
Yeah.
How efficient can they be in order to kind of make those changes to make that difference?
Yeah.
Remains to be seen.
Also, with innovation in Formula One, which is something that's been talked about for years and years and years in Formula One, there's always something new that eventually happens. Every time it happens within the last, I don't even know, 10 years at least, it's been from the top teams.
Yeah.
And it's never a different team. The only time you see a different team catch up on something is when they've copied the top teams. When they had the pink Mercedes and things like that. That's kind of innovation in the way. They found a loophole and built the same car.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting now to see, after a year of the new regulations, if someone picks up on something that no one else did.
Yeah.
A little bit like the extremely light chassis, like Red Bull are probably going to test now. Will that be the innovation that changes them into the future again? They're just going to keep propelling themselves into a place where people can't catch up. So I think that's what the other teams need, is something like DAS to just turn that car around and turn it into something that no one else has got.
Yeah, we've not seen anything.
It's because of technology, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but they're so restrictive, these regulations, that they don't allow the teams to be able to experiment like Mercedes did with the DAS system, which I think is unfortunate. And you think you have to look at the core values of what Formula One is and what it stands for. I know that we're coming into an impasse in the next 10 years or so with the whole electric and petrol debate. And we'll probably discuss this in a bit more detail in another podcast throughout this season. But they think they have to kind of take a hard look at what is it that Formula One stands for. What do they kind of want to kind of present to the world as to what they're about? It'll be an interesting discussion when we do have it. But we've digressed again. So we'll go and talk about Nick de Vries next. And so Nick is one of the oldest of the drivers. Grammar's perfect,
whatever it
is.
Is.
He's one of the older of the drivers. He's the same age as me, unfortunately. So he's not that
nearly
far off.
Pardon? Nearly in a box.
I won't go that far. Well, I feel nearly in a box after today after running around London. But he is older, and so it's an unconventional age to come to Formula One. Often we see, like the likes of Max Verstappen at the age of, what was he, 17, 16? Something like that, ridiculous like that. And Lance Stroll at 18. Lewis Hamilton was even a bit older than that. I think he was 20, 21 before he came into Formula One. So he's come in quite late. He's obviously Dutch, as is Verstappen.
Thanks, Tom.
Giving you all this crucial information. But Nick has had experience of winning major championships. Piastri has won the junior championships, but actually Nick has gone that step further, in my opinion, because after winning the Euro Cup Formula Renault Championship, coming third in Formula Renault, just the normal Renault, I don't really know what the difference is.
Yeah, Formula Renault is very similar to what we're looking at. They're just different types of formula.
Yeah.
But it's still a major competition for young drivers to enter.
It is, yeah. And then he became Formula 2 champion, which obviously Piastri has done. A big achievement. The likes of George Russell, Charles Leclerc have all done the same thing. But he then made the unconventional move from Formula 2 to Formula E. Typically, we see what Piastri does. He goes from Formula 2, wins the championship. The rules stipulate that once you've won Formula 2 championship, you're then barred from entering the championship again. Obviously, because they expect those champions to go into Formula 1, which realistically they should do, but obviously there's not enough seats. And so he made the move in rather than take a year off or 2 years off, because I think he was still fairly old at that time. I think he won the Formula 2 championship in 2019. So it's only 4 years ago. So he'll have only been 24. So still quite old to win the Formula 2 championship. He then made the move to Formula E, which he then eventually won. And so he has the experience of being in that championship fight at the top level of a certain category. And I know some people will argue that, Formula 2, obviously the cars are quicker, more, demanding than Formula E. But I think there's more money and development being ploughed into Formula E. He won that championship with Mercedes. That's an outright manufactured team, something you don't really get in Formula 2. So he's had that experience. So he is a good bet. And we saw how good he was in Monza.
Yeah.
He is a really good driver. We saw that he can learn the car a little bit like how Norris did with the McLaren. He has the ability to be able to pick up differences in the car and extract that performance immediately. And so we know that De Vries can do that.
Yeah, he's able to adapt, which is the main thing in Formula 1. If you can do that, you're going to be fine.
You're golden.
Yeah, exactly. But Nick De Vries has a really strange past. Again, a bit like Logan Sargent, where he's been in every championship you could possibly imagine. He's done absolutely everything. His parents, when he was younger, loved motorsports as well.
We're getting a full backstory.
Yeah, we're getting a bit of a backstory.
A deep dive. Go on, I'm listening.
I did more research on him because it was more interesting, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So his father owned car dealerships and sold absolutely everything he had to put Nick into a racing seat within the KF series for karting. All the way up to
we've heard time
doing.
And time again.
Yeah, karting's common, but he started pretty much the same time as Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. So he's always raced with them through his younger career. Never quite able to beat either of them. So he's never been that driver you'd expect to come into Formula 1, but he's gotten this chance now because I think he has been a champion, so he knows what that feels like, but he's saying he doesn't really want to bring that into it because it's a completely different series.
Yeah.
But I think that mentality is going to be completely different to what Logan Sargent or Piastri can really bring. Well, Piastri's got the championships too, I guess, but he is a grinder. The whole way through, he's had to grind, and he's not had the money backing like Logan Sargent has. His parents were probably over $1 billion or billions. So I don't think he's someone to put a negative opinion on straight away. I think we should give him a chance in this car because I genuinely think he could be a really fast driver.
Yeah, I think I see the one thing with De Vries that I feel in terms of what his performance will be like, I kind of see him getting to the level of Gasly, Ocon, that type of driver.
Falling off.
Really, really dependable. I think he will be consistent, but I don't think he'll have what Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, those flashes of brilliance that we see. Even, in the likes of Carlos Sainz, we've seen him out-qualify Leclerc, which is no easy feat. And so I just think that he's always going to be a good bet, but I don't think he's going to kind of be the one to kind of, I don't know, set the world on fire in Formula 1. And you kind of see that on his past results from his junior career. He'd have a couple of championship wins or a podium, whatever it might be, but then there'd be a few years between mastering a championship, and that maybe to me shows that while yes he adapted really quickly when he was driving for Williams at such short notice, that maybe to really extract the full performance to the point where he can win a championship, he really needs a lot of time with the car. And that was something that we saw with Ricciardo. You know, he needs a lot of time, or he needed a lot of time with that McLaren that he just didn't have. You know, he's at that age and that level where you'd expect him to be able to do that, you know, straight off the bat. And so, you know, whether that will hinder him, I don't know, because obviously AlphaTauri aren't going to be challenging for championship wins, but they're going to want to be at the top of the midfield at the very least. And so, can De Vries do that for AlphaTauri, do you think?
Yeah, well, he's with Yuki on that lineup this year, so I think Yuki's a good teammate for him to be with because he's not going to challenge him too much. Yuki doesn't really seem to be someone at the centre of attention anyway. Mm-hmm. He's not the greatest Formula One driver we've ever seen.
What?
Well,
this is news to me.
Yeah, but I don't want to get too controversial again. I like Yuki, but I don't think he's going to be someone that's going to outcompete the other best of the rest drivers like Lando and things like that. But I think Nick will give him a challenge, push the car well, hopefully. But I still don't think they're going to be a best of the rest team. I don't think AlphaTauri can do that.
Well, they had a pretty abysmal season last season, didn't they? They finished 9th.
Yeah, hardly any points.
They got beaten by Haas.
Yeah, that's quite an embarrassment.
That is an embarrassment, considering how much money is being backed for that team. You know, it's a sister team to Red Bull, you'd think.
Exactly. Every time you hear the Red Bull name in Formula One, you expect a lot. And I feel like that AlphaTauri car, or previously Toro Rosso, was always a bit better than what it was last year.
Because they've always been that team that have kind of outperformed what you would expect them to do. You know, they've had the odd win. You know, we had it with Sebastian Vettel. It was way back in 2007. Was that a Monza? I think it was.
Yeah.
You know, performances like that they've been able to kind of grind out. But last season they just didn't seem to show that same kind of sort of brilliance that we've seen from AlphaTauri and previously.
I think it's going to be a different team this year because the actual promoting of AlphaTauri as a brand is ridiculous. I feel like there's shops popping up everywhere.
We saw one today.
And it's just something I've definitely never seen in London before. Well, I don't come that often, but I saw one in Monaco. I saw one in London. I keep seeing them popping up. Yeah. So it seems like the financial backing of the actual team is becoming more. It's becoming its own kind of thing.
Yeah, well, they are becoming a more independent team.
Yeah.
And this is something that they've been stressing is it isn't just a Red Bull sister team. They are undertaking a lot of their own development. I think they're even going to the point where they're developing things like the gearbox themselves rather than taking those components from Red Bull, which they are legally allowed to do.
As well. Yeah, and I mean, even the livery shows that they're trying to get away from the standard one single design of a car that they're going to have to carry on using because Red Bull don't change. Their livery's the same one.
Boring car launch.
The release was ridiculous.
We won't go into that because we could talk about that for hours.
That was ridiculous. But the new car launch for AlphaTauri was more precise. It was quick. It's over within 10 minutes.
Yep.
But they gave us a really good rundown of what that car is going to be able to perform like. And it looks completely different to what it did last year. So hopefully it's not just a mess on track and it looks stupid again, like boring. I think that's enough for them. Just look cool on track. Just do a good job.
That seems to be the premise of their entire brand, isn't it? They don't really care if it goes quick as long as it looks good. But then, does it look good with that Flexbox logo? I just absolutely
the Flexbox
detest
logo. Not great.
Logo. And it's a bit strange with all those red flashes of, it's really, really dark, muted blue, and then vibrant, bright red of the Orland.
But it looks cool.
Branding.
I like the look of it anyway.
I rate it. I think the Flexbox logo needs to go, or at least get them to change.
A monogram on the Haas just takes over the entire car.
I'm not a fan of the Haas. I'm not a fan of the Haas at all.
We actually heard that a little bit in the Racers podcast about the cars and the liveries and how they're stripping off so much of the colour.
They are,
and they're just becoming more and more dark colours, black and carbon fibre.
Which is something that AlphaTauri haven't done, which then feeds back into the fact that they just want to look good rather than go quick.
What they're doing. Yeah, exactly. Because you'd think now you may as well go completely black. And I feel like the Mercedes is going to be the most interesting of the releases because they keep hinting at the fact that car is going to be black.
There's so many differing, like, you want one picture that say black and we love black, and then the next thing it's silver arrows, always silver arrows, and the next thing it's just pure turquoise from the Petronas colours. We don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a mix mash of all three of them.
Maybe, yeah. I'd like to see something like the old chrome colours come back again. That would be awesome.
Love that. I wanted McLaren to do that because they did tease a picture of the old, I think it was a 2008 McLaren.
Yeah.
But then they'd also put the papaya in with it, which
we thought it was coming back for a second, didn't we?
We did think. We don't know yet. We don't know yet.
They keep going off off media in general, like Instagram, TikTok, all of that stuff, it seems huge for the teams now for promoting. So they put up these polls saying what colour is your favourite. They put up like 5 options for Mercedes, and the black one came out on top with like 80%. So I feel like they've got to go towards that, especially with the way cars are dark coloured now. They could make that a really cool looking car. I don't even know why we're talking about this.
I know, yeah, we're
going to digress again, but we'll talk about this another time.
We'll quickly go back into AlphaTauri. So for me, I think that signing is a really good signing for AlphaTauri because it allows them, yes, they're going to look good on track, but it gives them a driver that's raced in, what has he raced in? He's raced in karting, obviously, but Formula Renault, Formula 2, World Endurance Championship, 24 Hours of Le Mans, Formula E, European Le Mans
Indy
Series.
Last year as well.
Did he?
Yeah, it's not on there. I don't think it'll be on your list because it wasn't on Wikipedia. But he did do some kind of Indy testing, so he seems to have been he's everywhere.
He's got a wealth of experience and a load of different machinery, and so I think he will be a valuable asset to AlphaTauri to be able to develop that car. And one thing that I did think was it puts Red Bull in an excellent position because they've got Verstappen, who's the golden boy. They've got Perez, who's doing a pretty decent job. But Perez has to now he's got to be, yes, sir, please, sir, 3 bags full, sir. He's got to do everything that Red Bull tells him because if he doesn't, Ricciardo comes in and they know that Ricciardo can perform for them. If Ricciardo doesn't, we've got De Vries waiting in the rings, they've got every corner covered. They've done it well, sneakily. You look at it on the face of it, but they've done a really good job of being able to kind of put all their ducks in a row so that they are sorted. We've even got Liam Lawson who finished really well in the Formula 2 Championship last season.
He's incredible. Again, another great driver that's probably not really getting mentioned much at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, Red Bull have just got it all sorted. They seem to have their driver lineup completely sorted. A great car anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether or not Nick De Vries would take that spot over Ricciardo now that Ricciardo's the backup driver and he's got experience in that team. I just don't see him happening to move on to that.
Yeah.
But who knows? It's just a really good and easy signing for that team. They don't have to do anything to get along with him. He's got experience in racing. So hopefully that little bit of an age gap between him and the younger racers actually proves to be a good thing for them. It
may even progress Yuki Tsunoda because he's going to have a lot of experience of working with a lot of different teams.
Yeah, and especially having different machinery as well. I mean, being in all of those different championships, I think that shows his adaptability and how he can get into a car and just race it.
Yeah.
Because there's drivers like Latifi who might struggle with that coming into Formula 1 having no idea what he's doing and turning off the wrong areas of the track and things like that. It just didn't make sense. So as long as we don't see a Latifi type performance from Nick De Vries, I think he'll be okay.
It's just not
we'll
possible.
Never see that again. I feel like that might be one of the worst Formula 1 drivers I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get onto that now.
We won't get onto that. But yeah, we've got to wrap up because we've only got a limited amount of time. So it's a short form podcast. So I just kind of want to say a big thank you to everybody that listened to us last season. The numbers kind of kept rising as we went through. We're seeing a lot more engagement on social media channels. So if you aren't following us yet, please do. Obviously, it's at F1's sake Brad. At F1's sake Tom. I'll keep reiterating it. We are now also on Instagram, so we'll be posting clips from this recording. So if this just sounds amazing, which it probably will, and it will look fantastic,
probably.
It's because we had no involvement in how it sounds or how it looks.
It's all done for us.
Talks.
Yeah. I mean, what an experience has been to come to Spiritland and meet the guys here. Tom, the producer, seems like a really nice guy as well. So we've got all of this for us.
And obviously Ollie, who's invited us.
Yeah, Ollie. We've got Alex is here, come along with us. So massive thank you to Alex for joining us and actually giving us the opportunity to record all day.
Yeah.
We probably sound like idiots on that recording, but you know what? Who cares?
We are idiots, so it's fine.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. But yeah, thanks for everyone. I can't believe we're even sitting here.
I know, you wouldn't have thought this time last year that we'd be sat in a professional recording studio filming and recording our first podcast of the season. It's unbelievable. The people that you meet, through this medium and through the sport is fantastic. Meeting people like Ted Kravitz today and speaking to Scott Mitchell, Ed Straw from the race, all the information, they go to all the races throughout the year. And so to kind of have that, engagement with those and talk about the sport is fantastic.
Yeah.
So to everybody, really, really thank you very much for kind of listening to us, supporting us. We're going to try and get things better and better as we go on. We're putting more and more time into it. We've got a few special guests lined up for this season, I'm sure. We've already got one in the works that we filmed a couple of months ago, which we'll be releasing at some point in the near future. And if you know anybody who is in the world of Formula One, anybody that's listening, get in touch. We can speak to them. We've got a few people we've networked today. So really, really big things coming from us this season. But to everybody that's listened, we really do thank you for listening, because we absolutely love doing this.
Yeah.
And we like doing it in person. So the more people that listen, the more chance I have of persuading Brad to come and live maybe not on an island in the middle of nowhere.
All right. Let's leave it at that then.
We'll leave it at that. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Make sure you're following us at For F1's Sake Brad, at For F1's Sake Tom. And then I think that the Instagram is just For F1's Sake.
It is,
yeah. We'll be posting everything on that. And we're also on TikTok. I can't even remember what the TikTok is, but we've got a link tree on all the social media, so you'll be able to find it. And so we'll be posting clips. We even could probably get Kelly back on as well, because she was fantastic last season. So yeah, there's loads of people coming in, loads of people that we're working with. But until then, till the next episode, until all the liveries have been released and we've got testing starting, we'll see you then. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.